we give the golden thumb to our filmmakers. We are so honored to have you here. James.
I got yours.
And Shailene.
Oh my gosh.
So honored.
Thank you.
This is actually a cast of Roger's Thumb, and they were made by the people who make the Academy Awards, which you both will be getting plenty of in your careers, I'm sure. But it starts with the golden thumb.
Thank you. It's such an honor. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Why don't you sit in the middle? And joining us is Steve Prokopy of Ain't It Cool News, who's going to help us with the Q&A. This is a spectacular movie.
Thank you.
Okay. It's spectacular now, and I think forever. It's such a surprising film. I've known you a long time, and this is such a. Each film you make seems to take a giant step up, and yeah. And I mean. Well, why don't you just start by telling us how you came to this film?
Sure. Well, Smash was at Sundance last year, and the producers of this movie had been trying to get it made for a long time. It had started as a novel, as a wonderful novel by Tim Tharp that was nominated for a National Book Award, and then the writing team of Scott Neustadter and Mike Weber, who wrote 500 Days of Summer, they had adapted it. And this predates me. And after Sundance, they got me the script. And I was hesitant to read it because I really, I had directed 2 films that I had written, one that I'd co-written, one that I'd written by myself. But honestly, the thing that got me really excited about it was I knew of Scott and Mike, I knew of the novel, and I'd heard that Shailene had read it and really liked the part of Amy, and that was like probably the biggest incentive for me because I'd loved her so much in The Descendants, and I hadn't seen a performance like that by a young person in so long. Yeah, I mean, she reminded me of, when I see like the earliest performances from people like Deborah Winger and Sissy Spacek and Barbara Hershey, people like that, that's what it kind of reminded me of, just a performance with strength and courage and integrity and just a total lack of vanity. And anyway, so I read the script and fell in love with it, and we met, and the rest is history.
Shailene, you want to say something about him now?
How am I going to follow that up, buddy? Yeah, James, it was a project that I was in love with for over 2 years. I thought the script just screamed humanity and rawness and realness that you don't really capture a lot in young adolescent coming-of-age films. And I sat down with James when he became interested, and we had lunch, and his vision for this film was unlike any vision I had ever heard of for a coming-of-age film. He talked about how real he wanted it to make, and this is going to sound so weird in a Q&A, but the sex scene came up in our conversation, and he was like, I don't know if you've ever done a scene like that before, but the way I envision it is I want it to be real, and I want it to be raw, and I don't want it to be all romantic and colored with fluff that doesn't actually exist when you're that age. And that was one of the biggest deciding factors. I know that sounds so weird, but yeah, you're a true warrior of truth, and that's what I love about you. And yeah, I could go on for a long time. James Ponsoldt is really one of my favorite human beings on the planet.
I've thought of you of many things, but never a warrior of truth.
Can I get that on a sort of
T-shirt?
Yeah.
The warrior of truth.
One thing I found about that scene and about every scene in this film is that it's a funny thing. They're unexpectedly real, they don't. you don't trade in movie conventions. It's what I think Roger would call observational, and I mean, well, we'll talk. Steve's got a question. I'll talk to you about Athens, Georgia, a little bit.
I was just going to follow up on that particular scene. I don't want to embarrass you by staying on this love scene, but no, I told James last week when he came to Chicago that scene in particular is so intimate and so believable that you almost want to look away. Like you feel like you've walked in on something that you're not supposed to see, and it's really, I mean this in the best possible way, but it's uncomfortable almost because it's so personal. It's so about those two people, and it's not for people to watch. So, and you cut away like at the right moment too, I think. So, but it was, yeah. I mean, was it basically just a couple people in the room when you were shooting that?
There was like 20 people in the room.
Awesome.
20. And then we had this two-way mirror. There were another 20 behind that. We had a row of
Miles
monitors.
and I were watching the whole thing.
Half
we had
the town
playback
was
going
there.
at the same time.
Yeah, that's how we paid for the movie. We just sold tickets.
Yeah, no, it was a very intimate environment. There was only, 3 people in the room besides Miles and I. It was a very safe environment, which you created.
Is this the first time you've done anything like that?
It was the first time I ever made love on screen.
Ah.
Miles, yeah, his too. His too. And he was a gentleman, I must say. He was a gentleman.
What was in the flasks?
Water.
Oh. There seems to be a lot of alcoholism in your movies. Smashed, obviously, from the title, but this was far more subtle. I mean, it was always present but never dwelled upon, and yet it drove the entire movie. And why don't you tell them a little bit about Smashed, and because it's a similar theme in a lot of ways. These are kids as functional alcoholics, and Smashed was adults as functional alcohol.
Yeah, I mean, Smashed was something that started through my friendship with Susan Burke, who's a really talented actor, comedian I know in Los Angeles, and one of the funniest people I've ever met. And I met her when she was just getting sober, and she's just a few years younger than me. And it started from our conversations about really dumb things that we'd done when we were drunk, and things that we wish we could be forgiven for, and things that we wish hadn't been videotaped or photos taken of or whatever. And we realized that there hadn't been a story that we'd seen, a film that we'd seen that dealt with substance abuse or alcoholism that we actually related to. Like, there's some really iconic films, but for the most part, I sort of am in awe of the performances in those movies, but I always feel like they're about the other. There's someone that's so far gone that I just can't relate whatsoever. And also, there are movies about diseases, and it's hard to make a movie about a disease. And we wanted to make something that was a love story, that was sort of a portrait of a marriage through the lens of the wife, and really something that would be relatable to people that aren't dealing with alcoholism, which is to say, it was a story about fidelity and sort of supporting your partner and willing to make sacrifices and changes when they have to. And in the case of this relationship, she gets sober really early on, and it's sort of about the way her getting sober destabilizes the relationship, because they work great when they're both drunk, but when they're sober, they just don't have nearly as much in common. In the case of Spectacular Now, again, I didn't see this as a story about alcoholism at all. I mean, I think it's the way that he definitely drinks, and it's sort of, to me, it's part and parcel of adolescence, which is to say, not everyone drinks when they're 18, but if you do a movie with a constellation of characters that are that age, we've seen the extreme on one side, like they could be doing meth and raping each other. Like, we've seen the horror story, and we've seen the Disney version where they're kind of, singing and dancing and nothing bad happens. And I think this is sort of a comfortable middle ground. And ultimately you kind of realize that there's a little bit of darkness there, and that he's sort of dealing with some pain and some daddy issues that aren't as clear at the beginning of the film.
At least they're not like previous daddy issues we've looked at today.
Yes, exactly. Escape from Tomorrow.
Shailene, I know that a lot of this movie mirrors some of James's high school experiences. We won't talk about all that, but does this high school seem real to you, being closer to high school than anyone on the stage?
What are you talking about? Yeah, no, I think I think, I mean, rewatching it tonight, it's the most authentic story about adolescence that I can remember seeing. My high school experience was similar in some ways and different in others, you know, human to human, it varies, but the characters were very real. I think you're a master at like casting, and every single person that he casted was so real, and I love the fact that there wasn't makeup and there wasn't the Cassidy character. James, you could have easily cast somebody who could have stereotypically been the pretty girl in high school who gets everything she wants. She's a cheerleader. But you went with Brie Larson, who's such a beautiful artist and who brought something truthful and authentic to the, I keep using those words, but they're just the best words for what I'm trying to articulate. Yeah, I mean, my high school experience was different, but this was definitely very, very real.
Yeah, it felt real to me. I mean, you shot this in the town that you grew up in, right?
Yeah, we shot in Athens, Georgia, which is where I was born and raised. You know, the first day of shooting, it was in the that convenience store parking lot, you know, where you see like Sutter and Ricky sort of walking through. I was born in the hospital across the street. The houses and streets where we shot were where I played as a kid, and it was as hyper personal as you can get in a really weird way, actually. I mean, I never would have written a script that was so nakedly autobiographical, but some other guys did, so I felt that I sort of had to make it.
So they wrote your life without you knowing about it.
To some degree, yeah.
You should mention those two guys who wrote this movie. You also wrote 500 Days of Summer, which probably a lot of you have seen. Again, capturing a younger kind of love that also falls apart.
They also adapted a book that is very popular that many of you have probably read called The Fault in Our Stars, which Shailene is going to star in.
Yeah.
It's a heartbreaker. Oh my God.
You told a really funny story last week about the scene, and I watched it this time, and I noticed at the scene where you guys are walking through the woods that ends in your first kiss, and how was it a Steadicam that it was a little hard to manipulate or navigate through the woods, but because at the very end I noticed it goes just before you cut away. But tell that.
That's low budget filmmaking. No, I mean that scene. That's probably one of my 2 or 3 favorite scenes in the movie, and it was really important to me. I mean, that's a oneer. You know, that's them. That's 2 actors doing like 5 or 6 pages of dialogue, and if there's a single slip up, the take is kind of unusable. It's also a camera operator sort of backpedaling through a slippery, woody, slippery, muddy kind of forest area as it was about to storm. So it was a lot of things sort of needing to sort of sync up. And yeah, I mean, the tough thing was a Steadicam rig, for those of you that haven't operated one, they're really heavy. And people were kind of doing a lot of different hats, but it wasn't actually a traditional Steadicam operator who we had. So it was someone who was really struggling and doing an amazing job. But so he was, you guys were pitch perfect from take 1, but he was really struggling, and he started collapsing. Yeah, I mean, and because like we had to really work out the timing, we were running out of film in each take, and the sky was starting to rumble. This was August in Georgia, so think like 104 degrees, totally humid, and it could threaten a thunderstorm at any point. So we had, I think, this was the one that we used was take 3, I think, and sort of what you see is they kiss, they pull away, this sort of bug kind of, Miles is just responding to some bug, and then you see the camera kind of dip a little bit, and that's the camera operator collapsing. And we run out of film like 15 frames later, and then the sky opens up, and there's a thunderstorm for an hour and a half, and we had 3 takes. And then when at the end of it, the light had completely changed, and we got a couple other takes, but it was like clearly not going to match, and so we sent the footage to be processed, having no idea if we had gotten it. And then there was this amazing gift of actually seeing it and seeing how natural and spontaneous you guys are. And for me, it feels like I'm watching 2 people fall in love, and sort of even that kind of slip at the end. What's a little, like if this was a $50 million studio movie, that would have been a perfect set. Again, we would have had 2 days to shoot it, but that little mistake, that thing that people say about Persian rugs, where the weaver sort of weaves in a flaw intentionally because only God is perfect, as they say. Like, I like the idea of those little flaws, those little fingerprints make it feel more human.
You're using this word film. I've heard of it, but what is it exactly? No,
It's something they used back in the Chaplin used it. Buster Keaton used it. They used to use it. They used to project on it. Yeah, we shot this on Anamorphic 35, which was a big. It was really.
Deserves a round of applause, I think.
It was. I mean, the films that I grew up in the '80s, so all those teen films that we can all name were meaningful to me. But the ones that I discovered a little later that really were resonant for me were some of the Kazan movies, like Splendor in the Grass, and movies like Last Picture Show. Movies that they're not teen movies. They're say a romantic drama where the characters just happen to be teenagers, but they're dignified and their emotional inner life is just as complex as a story about a character who's 60. And we wanted the film to sort of exist out of time and to sort of, not minimize what they're going through, but sort of maximize it and sort of give it a sense of place and give them a real environment. So, yeah, widescreen 35 like they used to do back in the good old days.
Yeah, one thing you said when we were, Ann and I were on the set, that this might be your last opportunity to shoot something on film.
It was kind of a take the money and run thing, where I was like,
Yeah.
And myself and our wonderful cinematographer, Jess Hall, who's shot so many beautiful movies. He shot a movie called Son of Rambo that I really love. It's a really sensitive film about, younger children. He shot everything on film, and we talked about that a lot, that there's just not going to be many more opportunities, and certainly to exhibit on film, you're just not going to see films projected that way much longer.
Yeah, there's something that made me. I just remember that it was a hot August day. You were shooting the prom scene, I think, when we were there. But I mean, this film was shot in the month of August. Sundance takes place in the month of January. All right. How did you get the film finished in such a short space of time?
We worked with really, really great people. I had a fantastic editor named Darren Navarro, who he works with a director named Azazel Jacobs, who I really love, who made a movie called Mama's Man, another one called Terry, which you might have seen with John C. Reilly. He's also cut the last two William Friedkin movies, Bug and Killer Joe, and he's just, we knew what we wanted, and we were able to work fast. And he was putting together an editor's assembly as we shot, so that within 3 days of wrapping and going back to LA, I was in the editing room and we were just working around the clock.
How did it feel to be hit by that car?
Oh, it was awful, man. It was just awful. It was fun. It was the first stunt I've ever done. I had a little corset situation and a guy off screen who yanked me, and I fell onto the street. It's pretty simple, pretty fun. 4 a.m. shoot.
That was the first stunt you've ever done? Yeah. It's worth noting she's become this big action star since this movie, by the way. She's in Chicago shooting this huge apocalyptic awesome movie she's the star of, and she's gonna be the new Spider-Man. You're like the next Bruce Willis or something. Hey.
And all from being hit by that car.
Took it like a champ.
Yeah. Let's take some questions from the audience. Just raise your hand and a microphone will come to you.
We have one from the center of the balcony.
Hi, my name is Ralph, and I'm going to talk so loud, sorry. Well, the first thing that I'm going to do on Monday morning is tell everybody about this movie, and I can't wait to see what you do next. And I'm just really excited. I don't get to see a lot of movies in the theater anymore because I have 2 kids, and we see a lot of animation. But anyway, I have all this emotion coming back when I watch this film because I grew up in the 80s too, and the lead character reminded me of a modern John Cusack and Say Anything, or even a movie that I like that I don't know if everybody does, Career Opportunities with Frank Whaley, and his performance in that. I mean, just the fast talking, but he was kind of you didn't know if he was a loser at first or whatever. And I just want to know how much. Some of those movies are more lighthearted than this, and it's more like an update of it. And it really brought me back to being a teenager, and the emotion in it just really got to me. I just want to know how much of the 80s kind of teen movies really have influenced you. And I really enjoyed it, so I just wanted to say that.
Oh, thank you so much. Those movies that you're talking about, the Cameron Crowe movies, the John Hughes movies, myself, the screenwriters, a lot of the producers, we grew up with those movies. I had a Say Anything poster on my wall when I was 16. To know Lloyd Dobler is to love Lloyd Dobler. Diane Court is about to meet Lloyd Dobler. Yeah, shorthand actually at one point for casting Sutter was like, yeah, it should be like John Cusack circa 1988. So yeah, I mean, I think you have an entire generation of filmmakers who grew up with those films, which were few and far between because they actually respected young people. And you know, to make a movie about adolescence doesn't mean you have to have an adolescent value system. You can have a very mature and respectful value system to the story. So yeah, those films are huge to me. I love them, and I rewatch them a lot.
I will add.
Yeah, thank you.
I will add that he is a lot like John Cusack, and I thought that the first time I saw it, but seeing it a couple more times, he's a much darker presence on the screen than I think Cusack ever was, at least in those movies. And we talked about this last week, too, that Nate mentioned that the subtext of the film, not the main story, is about him being an alcoholic, but the subtext is about what a corruptive force he is in her life, because she's a good kid. You know, I'm not even sure she's had a drink before that one scene with in the woods, so they're walking. Yeah, and by the end he realizes it too, and that's a tough thing I think to put in what a film about high school students, is that he is sort of slowly chipping away at her, functional alcoholic or not. He's kind of chipping away at what made her kind of pure, and that's like rough stuff. And I don't know if Cusack would have touched that when back in the 80s.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it was interesting. I mean, what Sutter had to be able to inhabit, like if anybody's seen Miles in Rabbit Hole, like sure. It's a really tough movie, tough performance. I mean, I'm not spoiling anything. He plays a kid who accidentally killed Nicole Kidman's child, hit him with a car. And he gives this she's emotional and loses it, and he just gives this very stoic, very still performance, the kind of stuff that like a young Henry Fonda would give, where it's all in the eyes. And then like if you watch him in Footloose, playing in the remake of Footloose, playing the Chris Penn role, he's just like dancing and he's a goofball. And like when you see the range, I mean that's kind of the range that Sutter has to have. He starts out kind of like the Footloose guy and kind of becomes someone else. But yeah, I mean part of what I love about this story is it is a story with a classic meet cute, but it's not about a manic pixie dream girl saving him, and it's certainly not about him saving her. It is kind of a toxic dynamic, and he doesn't treat the women, like the girls that he dates or his mother, all that well, and he had a pretty bad model for that as far as his, paternal sort of ideal of like how you should be in relationships, and he's got a lot of stuff to work out.
Another question?
Yes, at the rear of the theater, near the exit door, a little to your left.
Hi, everyone. My name's Chike. I'm a film critic who works for the local television station here. I have a question for Shailene. What moments in your own life resonate with you when you're looking at scripts or writing, or what really moves you, not as an actor, but as a person?
Ooh, that's a great question. This is like a little embarrassing story. I've been acting for 16 years, and I know very little about film. I've watched very, very few films. So for me, when I watch movies or when I read scripts, a lot of actors, a lot of friends of mine, like think about a movie that's from the 70s and that really inspired them, and I can't resonate or relate to that at all because I have no experience with those films. I look for scripts that leave me affected, for scripts or books or films that take me on a roller coaster ride where I laugh and I cry and I feel all the emotions that a human can possibly feel. I really love truthful performances and truthful words, and so upon reading this screenplay, that was definitely one of the things that called to me, and all aspects of my life. I just think that realness and humanness is incredibly important, not only in this industry, but in the world. I'm about to get real hippy-dippy on you guys. I think it's important, and if I can contribute a little bit of myself to that, then I'm going to, and I feel very honored and lucky that I have the ability to.
Tell us a little bit about your background, real quick.
My background?
Your professional background.
I started acting when I was 5 because I thought it would be fun. It was a complete accident. My dad was a school principal. My mom was a middle school counselor. So acting was not on their radar. They had no idea what it was. And I'm very lucky to have been born into a very supportive, beautiful family. And my Mom drove me to auditions for 12 years of my life, and my dad would support me when I got home, and it was something that I loved, but it was never the most important thing in my life. I had a very balanced life, and when I look back on my childhood, I did lots of commercials until I was about 10, and then I did small co-star roles, and then guest star roles, and then eventually movie of the weeks, and then a television show, and then The Descendants, and nothing's been overnight for me. It's been a constant kind of climbing up this ladder, which I feel very grateful for, because I had a very normal life and still live a very normal, awesome, weird life that's totally different from this industry. And yeah, it's something that I'm really passionate about, just because I love expressing and I love being able to feel emotion, like I just said.
I was just going to add, Shailene mentioned honesty, and I think like one of the best aspects of this film and what's really so great about it. I mean, there was an amazing script, an amazing book that was the source of that script, but sort of the best thing I think I did in directing the actors was really casting the right people and trying to not get in their way and really treat them as artistic collaborators and let them do their jobs and let them be advocates for the characters. And I tried to create an environment where Shay or Miles or Bree or anyone, if they felt that like a scene or a piece of dialogue wasn't honest, that they could just say, yeah, I don't really think my character would say this. And it would usually be a conversation like, how would you say it? And you always made things much more honest, much more real, just much more relatable. And I just really had 100% trust that you were going to make everything better than it was. So thank you.
Thank you. Are you kidding me?
You had the harder job as an actor in this, I think, because he's flamboyant, he's colorful, and you sneak up on us, and you take over the movie. It's really a remarkable performance.
Thank you.
Okay.
For me, it was very important when you read the script or when you read the screenplay, Amy is written a little bit like the stereotypical nerd dork in school who doesn't have any friends and who's really mousy and doesn't talk to people and goes home and reads comics. And when I first met with James, he was on the same page with me as far as she's not a stereotype. She's not a nerd. What is a nerd? Like, nerds don't, what is popular? These words that we pigeonhole kids in, and even as adults, they don't exist because nobody is characterized into one personality, into one thing. And I thought it was very important for Amy to be a very normal girl who chooses not to have a lot of friends, because in my mind, I thought she thought she was better than a lot of the kids in high school, but she was smarter than them. She didn't care about partying because she was looking ahead at the future, and James agreed with that. And for me, I don't know how I got so lucky. I got to work with you and Alexander Payne, and then you. You guys are like the two. I know you roll your eyes, but it's you literally, like, you're amazing, James Ponsoldt. I'm so lucky. We're all so lucky to have worked with you.
Yeah, you're getting a reputation as an actor's director. You're going to have to do an action movie next, I think.
Will do.
It will be the most honest human action movie you have ever seen in your life. I want to do that action movie.
I hear you are doing an action movie.
James Ponsoldt's not directing it, though.
Before we get, let's take another question from the audience.
We've got a question from Chaz in the back.
When I was looking at you two on stage, the reason I couldn't speak that much is I was remembering what Roger told me about this movie, and I just wanted to read some of his words, because he said that the authenticity of the characters for high school, for a movie about high school seniors, was so rare, and that what you did was really an achievement. And Shailene, I'm glad that you're talking about the honesty and authenticity. Roger said, "What an affecting film this is. It respects its characters and doesn't use them for its own shabby purposes. How deeply we care about them. Miles Taylor and Shailene Woodley are so there. Being young is a solemn business when you really care about someone. Taylor has a touch of John Cusack in his Say Anything period. Woodley is beautiful in a real person sort of way, studying him with concern, and then that warm smile. We have gone through senior year with them, with these two. We have known them, we have been them.
And Roger knew high school very well, and a high school very similar, I think, to this high school, because the same high school I went to. Let's take another question.
All right, center of the balcony.
For Shailene, I would just like to know what it was like to work with George Clooney.
Is he in this movie? Wait a minute. Just sneak him in?
Yeah, he was who was he in this movie? He was, yeah, he filmed, he was the cinematographer for this movie.
He drove the car.
You cut him out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's on the deleted scenes, the DVD. He's amazing. He's a superhuman. He's one of the most generous, grateful people I've ever met in my life, and I will look up to him until the day I'm not here anymore. I'm very lucky to have a big brother like him.
Who you like more, Jamie or George?
That's a very unfair question.
Let's take another question from the audience.
Yes, we have to your left, at the rear of the theater, to your left.
Yeah, I also appreciate it. I work with high school students every day, and it was so resonant and so honest. What I'm curious about is your show. Initially, all the students and I had such high hopes, and it seemed initially to be very honest emotions, and of course we all know it's gone way where no high school students ever go. And I just wondered, Shailene, how you feel about that, and was there any way to pull it back to any known believability of any student on this planet?
Are you referring to Secret Life of the American Teenager? Yes? Yeah. It wasn't very real towards the end of it. Yeah, I don't know how to answer this question. The first season was more authentic, and then it kind of drifted into its own world, and television's different from movies, just on a creative level. At least that experience was not one James was not there to collaborate with. Let's just leave it at that.
Another question?
Yes, little to your left, right here in the center house. Here you go.
Hi, my name's Karina. I totally agree with Chaz's words and Roger's words as well. Speaking as someone who just ended high school very recently, I'm a freshman here. It totally reminded me of my high school experience, my senior year. There were moments I was sobbing. There were moments I was so angry I was like crushing my popcorn in my hand. And I was just thinking about my own experiences. This movie could have totally ended in a different way. Miles's character, he could have not gone back, and I was just wondering, was this always the ending that was planned? Was the ending ever debated? Why this ending to the movie?
Well, thank you for your question. This was the ending in the screenplay. The novel has a different ending that I think is a little darker. I mean, I think this is an ambiguous but hopeful ending, and I think Scott and Mike, the screenwriters, really had the good sense to sort of take it to a place that was still honest to sort of the rest of the film, but just left a tiny sliver of hope. You know, I have no idea. People all the time are like, "What happens after the end?" And I have no idea what happens. I have no idea what should happen. Maybe she should just turn and run away from him. I have no idea. That's sort of up to you. But yeah, that kind of was the ending that we knew we wanted. We did debate sort of in the editing room exactly sort of the rhythm of him sort of coming up the steps. We didn't know whose face we would end on, which sounds minor perhaps, we debated about that for weeks, really, whether it should be on you or on Miles, and sort of we landed on you. Yeah.
Anyone who asks you ever what happens to them after this, just walk away from them. Don't even respond. And actually, I will. Again, third time I've seen it, the look on your face at the very last moment is perfect, because it's happy, it's it's just exactly ambiguous enough to make us worry, make us hopeful. It's sort of all those things. So I'm kind of curious, how many times did you actually made a different face?
I don't know.
How many times did you shoot that?
How many times did we shoot that?
Probably on you. We probably, I don't know, 6 to 10 takes maybe. I mean, it was, we were at that location only. It was more than most of the scenes. I mean, we were at that location just for that scene, but probably 6 to 10 takes. And we knew that we kind of would need some kind of gray scale of hopefulness, fear, anxiety, whatever.
It was interesting. We filmed that scene in the first week of shooting.
Second, maybe, but yeah, very early, yeah.
Early on in the shoot, and I remember you saying, I wish I'm kind of nervous about doing this now, because we don't really, you kind of have you think that you know where the film is going to go, but you don't know until you do the scenes. And so I think we kind of just explored every option. We explored the happy ending, the sad ending, the forgiving ending, the nervous ending, and ended up with that. I just try to make as many weird faces as possible.
She's really good at making weird faces.
Another question?
Yes. Oops, center house. Please stand.
Again, I would just want to echo what so many have already said. I taught high school for 27 years, and extremely authentic. And you've mentioned authentic and truth and honesty so much, but there's also respect. And one of the things that I really greatly appreciated was the respect you had for your, the supporting adult character, especially as a teacher. It wasn't this, either it has to be like, Ward Cleaver or Homer Simpson between those two. And you saw the adults and the boss, how they had respect and they reached out, but they weren't too forceful. And I'd just like to, if James, you might address a little bit specifically those two roles, what you were looking for and how you got that performance, because that authenticity everybody's addressing, I think, came so much from some of those supporting characters that allowed this whole thing just to resonate so deeply.
Sure, thank you. As far as how I work with actors, the toughest thing sometimes can be how you work with secondary characters, or how you cast them, how they're written, because it's easy to just sort of have them become two-dimensional. And I sort of subscribe, a lot of my favorite documentary filmmakers, like the Maisels brothers and Fred Wiseman, they would sort of, their rules were always have been simple. Like, you don't judge and you try to be the best possible advocate you can be for a character. And then the fiction films that I really love, like when I watch a Billy Wilder movie or an Ernst Lubitsch film, part of the real mastery of those films to me is that, there's, say it's Jimmy Stewart and someone else, and there's a love story at the center. There's all these secondary characters where even if they get one line, they're so three-dimensional in that one line, and there's such a sense of love for that character. They have an entire life off screen, and you really believe, or at least I do, that I could just walk off and see their movie, and that's my real goal. And then as far as the actors who played the adults, it's just some of my favorite actors. The actor that played the teacher is Andre Royo, who was on The Wire for a number of years, played Bubbles, and he's just a brilliant actor who should be in everything, and I just love him, and he's indelible and honest and funny and sad and all the things that make up a human being. And Kyle Chandler, who played the father, I loved for 5 years on Friday Night Lights and love him in everything he does. And Jennifer Jason Leigh, who played Miles' mother, was in one of the best teen movies ever, Fast and Furious High, and has given so many great roles. And Bob Odenkirk, who's on Breaking Bad, and Mr. Show, which was the funniest show ever, is great as his boss. I mean, it was populated with my favorite adult actors from TV, from film. So, and I mean the younger actors as well. Brie and Mason Holden, Dio, and all of them. They're just, and Caitlin Dever. It was just actors that I could watch do anything, and who I wouldn't necessarily classify as a dramatic or comedic actor, which is to say they can do any of those things. So there's a little bit of disorientation when you watch a film with them or any scene, because you have no idea if it's going to veer light or dark or where it's going to go. Anything's possible with actors that are just honest and alive and spontaneous on screen.
I think the character I want to see in their own movie is the sister. I think
Oh,
Mary
Mary
Elizabeth
Elizabeth Winstead,
Winstead,
sorry.
who was the lead in Smashed, and probably the single most undervalued performance of last year. I think that, but she's playing a part in this. I mean, I don't mean Mary Elizabeth. I mean, the sister is playing a part of this, rich housewife that. She's probably seen on TV before, but she's got the pearls and she's got the black cocktail dress ready to go. She's always wearing it, and I want to know how she got there. Like that's a story I would love to see one day.
Other characters in the movie, though, are the locations, and some of them. I was trying to figure out which was which. But if you talk a little bit about how you select the locations, and answer one question that Christy has, which is, why didn't you shoot at Cedar Shoals instead of Clark Central?
That's a stake in the heart for anybody that knows Athens. I went to Cedar Shoals. Clark Central is the rival high schools where we shot. They're old school rivals for decades. Cedar Shoals, when I went there, had so much character. I mean, it was 30 years old when I was there. It was based on a progressive school in Minneapolis, which had no walls. But that didn't work at this school because it was the Deep South and there were problems. And you couldn't have class with no walls, so there were brawls everywhere. So they put up these really thin metal walls. It felt like a prison. And that had character, and I would have shot there. But they, to the benefit of the students, they redid that school. So now it just looks like a new kind of institutional place that could be a hospital or a high school that's probably better for learning, but looks so boring on screen. And Clark Central, this high school that we shot at, has decades of life. And I guess the larger answer to your question is, we shot in Athens, which is my hometown, but for me, the main character of any film that I really love is the location, and the location is always the soul of the film. And it's not just where you shoot, but it's sort of the cadence of the film, the rhythm of the film, the way people sort of move through a frame. Is it as cluttered as people who are living in Midtown Manhattan? Is it as empty, as people that are living in kind of more rural spaces? And, I always try to cast locations the exact same way I would cast actors, which is that I want something that's both honest to the needs of the location, but that somehow is surprising and revelatory and indelible kind of, and is sort of one of a kind. And I always love places where I feel like if I don't shoot here, I might, it might be gone, a year from now. That bar could be gone, that school could be redone, anything like that. You don't, when you cast actors as honest as Shailene and Miles, it would be such a disservice to then just sort of put them in boring, soulless locations.
Well, Athens is really proud and happy that you decided to shoot the film there.
Real honor.
Let's have another question. Have another couple questions.
Directly in front of you, towards the back of the house.
Hi. I was one of the many people in the theater that screamed when the car accident happened. I didn't see it coming literally or figuratively. And then you gave us some time to recover as an audience, and then we found out she was okay. And maybe by a week later, she only had a small bruise on her face. So what were you imagining happened? Because I thought she was dead. I was very happy to know she wasn't.
Well, that'll be on the Blu-ray. She'll be dead on the Blu-ray. You'll see those. It's much worse. It's funny, that jump has happened at all of... It's funny, what we're actually showing, for what it's worth, is the Sundance. What we showed at Sundance, we've actually done some sound tweaks and brought the sound of that down a little bit. She was sideswiped. She wasn't hit head on, and she was not run over. Sort of the spin and she sort of did was that she got clipped kind of in the shoulder, and that some time, had passed, and that we didn't want to kill her. And it was sort of like so much of the movie. We kind of worked along the idea that, sometimes the greatest tragedy is a tragedy nearly averted. And it would have been a completely different film, and the way you would have felt about the character would have been completely different if she had just been dead. Yeah.
What about the fades to black? Almost like chapter breaks.
Yeah, it's something I like. It's not something I would do in every film. In this, it felt really natural, and I like the idea of ellipsis and just time passing a little bit, and sort of, when you're 17 or 18, every single day is different because relationships can be so unstable and you're so hormonal. And you can be in a great relationship with someone one day and be in a horrible relationship the next day. And I just like the idea of time kind of slipping by and a relationship kind of happening in front of our faces and sort of rising and falling. And who knows what happens after the end of the movie.
Let's take one more question.
All right, we have one more here.
Thank you. I'm the parent of a 16-year-old, so I think I was in a whole different space watching this, and I was really kind of horrified that there was no mention of his recovery program, and he just went from crashing his car to hugging his mom to arriving at your feet. So I'm just curious about that. I get that I'm overly upset by it. Sure. But I was thinking actually all along, oh, I'd love for my kids to see this movie and learn, and oh no, never mind.
Very good.
Well, thank you for being so invested.
You already made a recovery.
No,
movie.
I mean I did. You know, it's point taken. I mean, it was definitely neither this nor the film I made before it were supposed to be social issue films, and I find social issue films to be very good, like Red Asphalt, things like that, are great when you're in 8th grade and teaching someone to not drink and drive. But that whole saying that if you want to send a message, use FedEx, I subscribe to, because I don't want to pass.
That was Western Union.
The Western Union. Okay, sorry.
It's generational.
It's try best as possible to not pass any moral judgment over the characters and sort of what they do and how they sort of go through things. I think there is, as Nate was saying, there's ellipsis, and I don't know I don't think that he, to your question, I don't think that he started going to 12-step meetings, for instance. I don't know that he is recovered at the end, so to speak. I don't know, that he's in. I think he knows that he hurt someone who loved him unconditionally, and I think, that sort of traumatic emotional injury and physical injury, I think it's shaken him profoundly, and I hope that he's on the path to making some change in his life, but luckily he's 18 and he's got time, and we'll see where he is in 10 years. Could be better, could be worse. I think that's realistic, maybe unfortunately, but I think he's trying, and I think he wants to be forgiven, and that's meaningful to me.
So thank you very much for spending some time with us.
Thanks.
Thank you.